toward the one, the perfection of love, harmony, and beauty, the only being, united with all the illuminated souls who form the embodiment of the messenger, the spirit of guidance. Tonight, our theme is connection. So we're going to be exploring connection from some different angles and perspectives. So I'd like to begin by reading you a passage from Hazrat Inayat Khan. A person may ask, how, from a practical point of view, from a scientific point of view, can we understand this? The answer is, all that is external is not in direct connection with you and is therefore unattainable in many cases. Therefore, sometimes you can attain your wish, but many times you fail. But by seeking the kingdom of God, you seek the center of all that is within and without, and all that is in heaven and on earth is directly connected with the center. And therefore, from the center, you are able to reach all that is on earth and in heaven. But when you reach what is not at the center, all may be snatched away from you. The meaning of the word yoga is unity or connection. And mantra yoga means the sacred union between the outer life and the deeper life. The external self, the mind, and the body have confined a portion of the whole consciousness. The same portion is, in reality, the soul. It is as if a line were drawn upon a cloth, marking off a part of it as separate from the whole. Or it is as if we were to stand before a curtain with a small lantern, so that the light of the lantern falls upon the curtain and forms a patch upon it. In like manner, the impressions of the mind and body are reflected on the soul and separated from the whole consciousness. So we undertake our spiritual journeys. We seek awakening. We seek illumination. But it's very hard to get past the perception that what is going on is our separate self is somehow going to arrive at a different condition by undertaking this journey and process. And we may turn to a teacher, thinking, well, the teacher will help us get there. And that's true. It's important to have a guide on the spiritual journey. Or we may think about, well, God will bring us to our destination. And of course, that's important also. But so long as we're feeling ourselves as being separate from what we're connecting to, then right away we've created an artificial limitation. So let's think about the times that we try to tap into this deeper reality. Sometimes we may think of it as, well, we're going to tap into our higher wisdom, our inner guidance. And that's very wonderful. That's very valid to think of it that way. But sometimes we think of that as something separated from ourselves that somehow we can just get a glimpse of and receive something from, and then put it into action from our separated sense of self. But once again, it's very limited to what can be accomplished from that state of awareness, that artificial separation that we unknowingly and generally unconsciously create by identifying with the perception of ourselves as being separated from everything else. So we could think of awakening as a process of freeing ourselves from that false and limited identification and not awakening to anything that's other than our true self, but awakening to the natural condition of what our being actually is. Even though many possibilities of our true self are, we could say, dormant or latent, or we haven't figured out how to access those parts, we haven't figured out how to integrate those parts. So again, they seem separated. Many of us perhaps have had what the Sufis call hal, H-A-L, temporary peak experiences of higher states of consciousness. And that can include temporary experiences of higher realms of being, which once again we tend to think of as being someplace else than here. In fact, even the way we describe them, it's a higher realm, as if it's up there somewhere and it's not in relationship to what's here. But in actuality, all of these different realms on which we exist are co-present. But our consciousness is confined to a very small piece of that totality. And so we don't realize that we can get past that. And there's the story that Hazrat Inayat Khan tells about a prince who inherited a palace from his father. And the palace had 7 stories. But for a long time, the prince only went around the first story because he didn't even know the other 6 levels were there. And once he realized that they were there, then he could begin to explore them and utilize what was available in them. So how do we go about establishing these connections? Well, there's different, you could say, Pure Light would talk about the different directions of meditation. We could think that there's also different directions or aspects of ways of connecting. And one is internal. It's described as turning within. It's being able to experience our subtle or transcendent aspects of being. And for those of us who've been working with spiritual practices, perhaps for many years, this is very familiar to us. In fact, it generally seems much more attractive to hang out in these inner, subtler spaces because they can be very beautiful, they're very peaceful, they're filled with the colors, so to speak, of the divine qualities. And then when we finish our daily practices and go about our life out in the world, things are much more challenging. They aren't so beautiful, and there may be a great deal of conflict and strife and so on. So it can create a split in us where we want to just go back to this inner level and experience connection there. But if we're going to become complete and true human beings and fulfill the Sufism that Hazrat Inayat Khan, the vision that he brought to the West of awakening in life, then we need to be able to experience this deeper level of connection with those things that at first seem external to us, separated from us, other people, the environment, nature, circumstances, situations. But if we believe what the mystics have said in different ways in all the different traditions, that there is just one reality, that everything is an expression of that reality, call it everything is an expression of the divine being, including us having these experiences. And then if we can find a way of relationship with what we're experiencing as one aspect of the divine relating to another aspect of the divine, and not only a feeling of connectedness, but a feeling of circulation. A feeling of circulation of what? A circulation of light. And what's conveyed on that light that circulates? Well, it could be a particular flavor, so to speak, of any of the divine qualities. It could be compassion, it could be beauty, it could be joy, it could be wisdom, it could be truth, it could be majesty, splendor, so many different qualities. It's like a way in which that connection is not only experienced but opened up to become something more than what it was to start with. So it's a challenge in our spiritual journey to overcome these seemingly great divisions between our inner experience and our outer experience, between our sense of self as a separated individual and whatever else we're experiencing, but also in the inner direction, in the inner dimension. Oftentimes there's a split between what we think of ourselves as us, our human incarnation, and what we think of as the divine being, the transcendent. And we feel like it's something other than ourselves, that we're separated from it, that we'd like to gain some experience and relationship with the divine being. We'd like to be able to partake of the sacredness and the expression of the qualities and that divine presence. But it seems like we're here and we're having an experience of something that's separate from us. So, what would it be like to bridge that gap and realize that it's just like two ends of the same line, or a part of that ray that Murshid Hazrat Inayat Khan talks about, that each of our souls is, that emanates from that divine central sun, and our experience, our frame of reference, our vantage point is just a station. We call the stations Maqam, M-A-Q-A-M. It's a station in our capacity of the way that we experience the rest of ourself, the transcendent, the divine being. And it's also a station, a maqam, in the way that which we experience all the expressions of the divine being in manifestation in the world with our eyes open. And the same is true of the way that we have inner experiences on subtle realms of being. So what's the instrument, so to speak, or the medium that weaves throughout all of this? Well, the Sufis say that it's breath, that breath goes through all of the realms. And once again, we have to get past the limitation. When we think of breath, then normally what we're going to think about is what comes in our nose or mouth. The oxygen comes in, the carbon dioxide goes out, sustains our bodies. And that's certainly a very vital aspect of breath, keeps our physical body going. But breath is so much more than that. And that's why breath is considered a very essential practice across different spiritual traditions. And what is the way that we work with breath? What enables breath to be able to have this function of going through these different realms and enabling us to experience this interconnectedness, both internally and externally? It's consciousness. So once again, we need to get past what our initial association may be when we think of consciousness. Well, okay, I'm conscious, I'm awake, I'm aware of what is other than myself. But even in science now, many scientists are saying that more fundamental than energy is consciousness, and that in some models of physics, it's like, well, consciousness is the most basic form behind existence. So we can learn to operate with our consciousness through what? Through the vehicles that we have. And what's the one we're most familiar with? This one, our physical body, our self, our mind, our emotions. But we can use consciousness to direct what is conveyed with the breath and what is experienced with the breath in so many different ways. So let's try a simple one that's familiar to many of you. It's said that we are beings of light, and in a way, matter is a form of crystallized light, we could say. And it's a established fact that our bodies emit light, emit photons of different frequencies, and this is measurable. Some people can see auras, some can't, but whether someone can see them or not, there are different frequencies of light being emitted, and this changes depending on our health and our state of mind and so on. But just by adding to our consciousness the awareness that we are taking in light with each breath, we're taking in the light of the stars, we're taking in so many frequencies of light that are not perceptible with the ordinary senses, infrared and ultraviolet, and even beyond that. And we're also taking in more subtle forms of light that there aren't ways of measuring now, like what the Sufis call the uncreated light, or the all-pervading light, the light of the celestial realms, the heavenly spheres. But just by being aware that that's a reality, that's coming into us with each breath, and it's being made available to every part of our being, the tissues, the muscles, the nerves, the vessels, the cells, even the molecules and atoms of our body are affected by this light. And in response, when we exhale, the light that is emanated from us is increased. So now we're putting out more light than what was there to start with. And it doesn't take an act of will to do this. It's a very simple process. So try this for just a moment. Just feel yourself. You are a being of light with each breath. You're drawing in light. You're allowing this light to be felt and experienced through every aspect of your being. And it increases the amount of light that's emanated from you. And as you exhale, you feel that transformed light radiating out in all directions into space at the speed of light. And not only into the physical universe, but subtler forms of light are now emanating into the subtle realms of your being. That's been increased by the simple experience. So try this for just a moment. Now, we just did this very briefly, but if you could feel a change in yourself, a shift in yourself, then this has been an illustration of what happens not just by virtue of your being able to make this connection between your usual sense of yourself and the more subtle reality of yourself, you could say your transcendent self. That's a necessary first ingredient. But the significant part is what emerges from having made that connection, that could only happen from both sides coming together in this relationship and bringing about a transformation of light that could not take place from either side by itself. So this is a very simple illustration of an ongoing alchemical process that is ongoing and is greatly enhanced by our being aware of this relationship and allowing ourselves to establish this feeling of connection. Because so long as we're in our limited, separated personal state of consciousness, not a whole lot is going to happen if you try this practice. But if you just give yourself permission to open up to the deeper reality of your being, then I think you'll find if you work with this, and it doesn't take too long to begin to experience, there's a dramatic shift in what comes forth. So if I was going to outline what I consider to be some basic, very important principles of spirituality, this would be one of them. This would be that the fulfillment of what can occur that takes place through the uniqueness of our being can only take place when we open to this connection and allow the fruits of it to come forth. This connection between our manifest consciousness and our higher state or our transcendent state of consciousness. So let me read you some more passages. I found lots of really wonderful passages from both Hazrat Khan and Pir Vilayat related to this. This is Hazrat Khan. And he's saying that we don't understand that a life current runs through it all, and that is breath. It is easily seen when it manifests itself upon the physical plane, but on the higher planes it is not seen, yet it extends higher than the planes. If there's anything that connects the human with God, if there's anything that connects the mortal with the immortal, it is this bridge which we call breath. It is a bridge whereby to pass from the world of mortality to the world of immortality. It is the bridge whereby immortality passes down to mortality. That life which seems mortal, and I love this, that life which seems mortal is really the ray of immortal life. What seems mortal is only the shell. It is not life that is mortal, it is the cover that makes it seem mortal. How does a person see and hear and smell and taste and feel and touch at the same time? By the help of different organs of the body. The body of God is the whole universe. How can he, God, not feel every experience that is comprehensible in life? A Sufi need not go in search of miracles to believe in God and his power. For him, the wisdom and power which is constantly directing every affair of this world and the connection that one thing has with another thing, and so all the actions and every activity of the universe has connection and is one. This is Pir Vilayat. It is crucial here to spot the reason why it works so rarely. It is because we are so used to thinking of God. Let us consider the universe as the existential dimension of what we mean by God as other. In one's ordinary logic, one envisions that relationship is a connection between two different entities. It is difficult for our minds to reconcile our relationship with the totality of the universe, with the realization that the totality is the transcendent dimension of ourselves. I'll say that again. The totality is the transcendent dimension of ourselves, because in our commonplace thinking, relationship means the rapport between two things or ideas that is a relationship that's based upon a sense of otherness. Our sense of personal identity is mostly stronger than our sense of the totality of which we are an intrinsic part. What stands in the way of doing is our commonplace way of thinking. We assume that we are the spectator perceiving and cognizing the environment, events, circumstances, reality, the cosmos, the universe, God, as other than ourselves, as the object. But actually, we, our bodies, our psyche, our thoughts, conceptions, and emotions are those of the totality we call the universe or ascribe to God, not like the portions of an orange, but as a fragment of a crystal which behaves, but less well, like the whole of which it is a fragment, not simply as a truncated portion thereof. This basic way of envisioning reality, the holistic paradigm of science, applies to us and alters dramatically how we think of ourselves and our relationship to God and the universe. So think about this. We have it seems like such a long journey in our spiritual path. And we have different changing ideas about what transforms and how it's transformed and so on. But in reality, on one level, the dramatic change is a quantum shift in our whole way of understanding, thinking, and perceiving not only ourselves, but our experiences. So imagine if there could be just this shift in our way of thinking from this limited sense of identification to really feeling with a conviction, not just a belief. It's more than faith. It's just knowing that it's a certainty of the true nature of who we are. If we could make that little shift, then everything would change. In fact, we could say once that shift is made, the whole universe has changed. We become something much more than what we dared imagine that we could be. So close your eyes for a moment. And we have familiar phrases like be all that you can be. But give free rein now to what the Sufis call your true imagination, and allow yourself to open to being something almost infinitely beyond what you could imagine in your normal way, your conditioned way of thinking. And you're not trying to steer yourself in a certain direction. You're not trying to make something happen. You're just allowing yourself to open to the reality that actually is of who you actually are. You're allowing yourself to experience this deep connectedness on every inner level, but also, even if your eyes are closed, on every level to what previously you thought of as being external to yourself, not only in space, not only in this physical lifetime, in the physical world that you're in, but also in time. This connection that exists between all the different times of your being. In fact, There's one of the famous Buddhist koans is the question, what was your face before you were born? And your connection with all the experiences of your soul beyond this physical lifetime, after this body is long gone. You are connected with that right now. And you are connected with, and you have your life in all of the subtle realms of existence, all parts of the oneness of who you are. Like different overtones of one chord. So I'm going to put some music on now and just allow yourself to be able to experience this without trying to make anything happen in particular. And so when we can realize and experience and enable this connection between our manifest sense of self and the divine aspect of our being, we might say that we are completing the circuit with the sacred that enables sacredness to flow into manifestation and from manifestation, and also emerge into the new creation that the Sufis say occurs at every instant, that we can become capable of participating in the human divine co-creative process that fulfills the purpose of there being a manifestation. You could say it's our most sacred work that each of us carries out in our own individual way, answering the calling of our soul in life. So may we each always be open to receiving the continual showering of blessings coming from above and what seems to be outside of ourselves. And may we also each be a never-ending fountain and source of blessing for everything that we encounter. May we always participate in that miraculous circulation of the light of divinity in life, in all the relationships of all the forms of life with each other. Amen.